Talks. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. Today we are doing not a tech talk, a teach talk. Today's teach talk hopefully pairs well with last week's tech talk about discussion checkpoints. That was about a specific technology setting that is now available in Canvas, but today we want to talk about hopefully some kind of general theory and practice about designing discussion activities that are a little bit more impactful, a little more engaging, and hopefully can recognize and avoid some of the common pitfalls or shortcomings of discussion activities. And I see that Melanie is here, which is awesome because 2 years ago we did a similar topic for a tech talk and Melanie was part of that one. So Melanie, I'm going to steal some of the stuff that we talked about last time. Okay, let me share my screen because I'm going to have a document to help with this one. So the first thing I wanted to do was just spend a couple of minutes talking about some of the negative experiences that we often see when it comes to discussion activities, both as instructors and then also from the student perspective. Some of these come from my own experiences on both sides of that coin. I have been a student in discussion board classes and I have been a teacher of discussion board classes, so I have seen plenty of things that don't work so well, and I'm guessing most of you have as well, otherwise you probably wouldn't be at this session. But here are some things that I came up with, and maybe we can talk about them, and we can also add to this list, perhaps. On the faculty side of experiences with discussion activities, sometimes they feel very repetitive and predictable, right? If you're doing the same discussion format every week, which is not to say you shouldn't have consistency, but if a discussion activity is not designed in a way that engages well with the content and engages the students well, then it feels very rote, right? It feels very repetitive, very predictable. If you taught the same class for 5 terms, you can probably basically guess what every single discussion post is going to look like. And that's not fun for you as a teacher. But on the student side, they also often feel repetitive and predictable. The students feel the same way as you when it comes to some of these discussion activity experiences. From the faculty side, sometimes it can be very frustrating when students are not engaging with the learning materials. It's when it's very clear that they have not done the readings before jumping into the discussion board. They're just posting to post because they have to post. And that can be very frustrating because you can tell that they haven't read the texts. They're just talking off the top of their heads. Lack of alignment with learning objectives is similar. You have certain things you're trying to accomplish, and sometimes it doesn't feel like the discussion activities are accomplishing those objectives, right? You're like, I know I need to have these in this class, but I don't feel like this is doing what I want it to do. Non-substantive replies. Discussion replies can just be the worst, right? Talk about repetitive and predictable. If every single reply from every single student is just saying, oh, I like how you said that, I agree. That's very boring to read. It's very boring and frustrating to grade. But it's also very boring and frustrating for the students. They know that they're doing that, and they know that their peers are doing that. It feels like busy work to them. But that's a word that's a phrase that we hear from students all the time. Discussion activities feel like busy work. It feels to them sometimes like the interactions are forced. They are replying to each other because they have to reply to each other, not because they want to, not because the instructions of the assignment actually motivate them to do so. They're doing it because they don't get the grade if they don't, right? And that's why we get those repetitive, rote, non-substantive replies.
I agree with you. I like what you're saying.
Right. Thank you for agreeing with me, Cassie. I agree with your agreement. What a lot of these things lead to is misuse of AI. We are seeing that more and more, where suddenly your students' replies are very long and very voluminous and very I'm not going to say insightful because they're not insightful, but they have the appearance of being insightful. And the reason that is because what those students are doing is they are copying someone else's post out of the discussion. They're pasting that in a chat GPT and they're saying, please write a reply to this. And then they're copying that reply and they're pasting it back into the discussion board. And they're doing that because they don't feel any motivation or need to do any substantive discussion or interaction or replies. So they're doing it to get it over with, check off the box and move on. But again, the flip side of that is also demotivating for students. If they make a post and suddenly all their peers are replying with what is obviously AI generated replies, that's very demotivating and disengaging for them. I'm curious if there's anything that you would want to add to this list of negative experiences for discussions, because we can add more to it. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Tom, for agreeing with each other in the chat. If anybody else wants to either unmute and talk or post in the chat, we can. If either of you have anything you would add to this list of negative experiences with discussions.
I can add, I mean, for me as the instructor, in an online class, I really think discussions are important because you're trying to create a sense of community and allow other students to meet each other and learn from each other. So I think it's really important, but it's so hard to figure out how to do it well. And for me, I really feel bad when students forget to come back and join the conversation. Like, I notice that students do a pretty good job for their initial thoughts, but many times they forget to come back. And so for me, that's a big issue because I want them to take some ownership and responsibility, but at the same time, I don't want them to miss the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. I think that's why we do these, right? Especially in an asynchronous online class where we are trying to replicate or supplement what would have been a classroom discussion. That's what we're trying to recreate in an online class. And when it works, it's kind of great, right? We've all had, at least I hope we've all had good online discussion board activities where students are engaged and are carrying on a conversation and are engaging with the class materials in an interesting way. But it seems really hard to do that consistently and reliably, right?
I pulled the student surveys that we looked at last week, and I looked at it for this week for discussions. And we had some really positive responses to how a discussion could create a real collaborative learning space and build community. But then the majority of them were, one of them I thought was really interesting. It said, in my class, the discussion boards were worthless. Replying to posts did nothing for my learning. This should have been a regular assignment. Which I was like, wow, that's
Insightful.
That's pretty insightful.
But then most of them were like, they were kind of dragging on. I didn't like coming back to check. It was a bit of a nightmare to get good responses from my peers.
Yeah, that tracks with my experience as a student as well. Let's move on. So based on some of those negative experiences, Tom has the thing. This discussion could have been an email. Yeah, I mean, sometimes. So based on these negative responses, I kind of classified some of these pitfalls into a couple different categories. And one is, yeah, this discussion could have been an email, misalignment of format. Sometimes we do discussions because we think we have to do discussions, right? But depending on what the level of learning is on the Bloom's taxonomy, depending on what the ask is of your students, what they are supposed to be producing or how they're supposed to be engaging with the material, a discussion board might not be the best format for that thing. It might be better to just be an assignment. It might be better to just be an email. So I think that sometimes we fall in that trap of, well, I got to do a discussion because it's an asynchronous class. Sometimes yes, but sometimes maybe not. Misalignment of value. This is one that I added after chatting with you, Cassie.
Yeah, so this came from our discussion of discussion checkpoints.
Yeah.
Right, so what we often see with discussion boards is that students will like front load and they will post something, their initial post will be where everything is. And then they don't see the value in replying
Mhm.
because they're like, I got my points, or I got, most of my points.
Yeah.
And, they don't really know, like, we haven't communicated to them with the way that we're valuing the points, saying
Mhm.
like, this is worth a ton and your replies are worth basically nothing. We haven't showed them what we value.
Yeah.
We said your first post is what we value, your replies are not what we value. So if we can in some way demonstrate to them either in the instructions for the assignment coupled with the point values that we're giving,
Mhm.
things like saying, what I want you to do is post something, and then what I really want you to do is reply.
Yeah.
And your replies are going to be far more worth anything than your initial post.
Yeah.
I'd rather have the 10 really awesome replies and no initial post sometimes.
And you can do that.
If you can do that.
You can do that. That's something you can do. I had a thought and then I just lost it. When you said that the students think, oh, I've got my points, I don't need to do the posts. Or alternatively, I need to do the posts, but all I'm being graded on is number, right? My instructor told me I need to make 2 replies, so I'm gonna make 2 replies. It doesn't matter what they are, I just gotta do it. Tom says in the chat, also thinking about the dynamics of face-to-face discussion vis-a-vis online discussion. In-class discussions don't usually require everyone to participate, certainly not to make a point in direct response to the initial question that was posed. Yeah, I mean, we allow students to engage at the level they are comfortable with. Oftentimes, if we're grading those discussions or that participation, we're doing it in a very holistic way and not necessarily, we're not like, we don't have a timer and we're counting how many seconds each student talked and then grading them based on that, right? That's not how we do face-to-face discussions generally.
One of the positive responses from last year's survey said, I felt like it was the only community building project in my online classes, and I looked forward to my peers' responses. So like that was the dynamic where they wanted to come back and see what their peers were saying.
Whatever was happening in that one, it was working.
Yeah.
I think a big one when it comes to a lot of these problems is this idea of convergent questions. If you are asking or asking a question or giving a discussion prompt that kind of only has one right answer, then all the posts are going to look the same and all the replies are going to look even more the same, right? So I think that anytime we can come up with divergent questions where every student is going to share something different in some way, whether it's a different opinion, a different experience, a different artifact, a different data point, that is going to be much more useful as a group discussion than something where there's just one right answer. Janelle asks, I started requiring video responses and discussions and it seems to be getting students' attention. Yeah, I think that that's a valid way. We're not going to talk about that too much in this one, but I think that is definitely one way to do this is you're changing the format, right? The format for you, Janelle, the text wasn't doing what you wanted it to do. If it was a speaking class or a communications class, then sometimes you want to see and hear each other, and that might be the format that works for that. Yeah, Tom says, what is an open-ended question? And that can be tough too. Like if you go too far in that direction and it's too open-ended, then students really don't know what is expected of them, and then the answers are very vague and difficult to work with. But I think that there's a good happy medium, a good balance between too open-ended and too closed, something that you are more explicitly asking for a diversity of answers. Lack of authenticity, it kind of goes back to that discussion could have been an email thing. If we're talking about authentic assessments that mirror things in the field, in the discipline, then oftentimes a discussion with required replies is not how those communications usually work. Sometimes they do. We do that in Microsoft Teams in our office, right? Where we have those kinds of discussions and we're expecting responses from each other. But other times, not necessarily. Sometimes,
Mine are always like GIFs.
Just GIFs.
It's just GIFs.
Yeah, which
Oops, all GIFs.
I have seen. This is gonna run out of time, but I've seen instructors do GIF and image discussions where that is the format that they ask students to reply in, is in the form of an image or in the form of a GIF, and that can be a lot of fun. And depending on how you structure it, it can actually be really meaningful because you are getting them to engage with it in a different way. but that's what we do in teams, right? Or that a better format or a more authentic format might be in the form of a lab report or an Excel spreadsheet or an email communication or something like that. That might be a more authentic experience than asking them to post and then reply. And then the last one I have on my list here is lack of presence, both from the student and also for the instructor. Again, those negative experiences with discussions, it all feels empty and there's no real engagement. If your classmates are replying to you, it's just out of obligation to get the points. There's no content, there's nothing substantive about it. The other thing, and this is a tricky one, so I'm not going to say you should always do this, but sometimes a lack of engagement and a lack of presence from the instructor can be a detriment to a good discussion. I think that, again, there's a balance here because I think that we can sometimes get too involved in these discussions where the instructor is replying to every student and then the instructor kind of becomes the focal point of the attention and they start just talking to you as the teacher rather than to each other. But I do think that there is, in some cases, value in engaging with those discussion posts, at least to a certain extent, and especially early on in the week. So something, again, Cassie, we were talking about this idea of students have their own experiences and their own opinions that they can share in these discussions. But one of the things that you can bring to the table as the content expert is a more holistic, a more global understanding of the content and the ability to make connections between those things. So you can say, oh, Cassie said this in their discussion, and Caleb said this in their discussion. I, as the expert who have been in this field for a long time, notice a connection here that you may not have noticed. Let's talk about that. Let's explore that together. And that can be a really impactful way of adding more of your presence into those discussions. Sam asks, was there any information in the survey about instructor participation in discussions?
Sam, the only one I'm seeing that is somewhat related, the student said, I disliked the discussion that I participated in when no one responded at all. So I think, like, as Caleb was mentioning, the instructor's role may be to filling in on conversations that aren't going anywhere or don't have any traction, where the student feels like they need some validation. But most of the responses are the just usefulness for learning and then lack of peer participation. So I can keep looking though.
Tom just posted, there's some research about this too. Tom, do you have you read enough about that to give like the 30-second elevator pitch of what they found? Or not yet?
Yeah, no, this is from a research article that I found when I did a thing on discussions like a decade ago, I think. It was basically they were saying that students rated their self-efficacy and their level of improvement in critical thinking much higher when faculty member presence in discussions in online classes were sort of more moderate and constrained, as opposed to being constantly present, allowing that sort of discussion to unfold in a way that made sense, but also to intervene at appropriate times as well, as opposed to like being completely absent or being like really present, because being too present shuts down student engagement, and not being present enough makes the space feel like unhinged and potentially unsafe. So,
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, cool.
I think we've suggested at some point to an instructor that instead of being present, if the conversation is going safely and well, you don't necessarily need to respond, but doing a summary at the end, saying like, hey, one of the things that I saw that I loved during this discussion were these following things, like a discussion wrap up. I remember talking about that, and that seemed like a really good way to give the instructor the opportunity to say like, hey, I've been reading your stuff. I don't need to intervene necessarily, but I can take the time to draw these connections and show you guys how great you're doing.
Yeah, so that's doing two things, right? One is you're using your expertise to synthesize these concepts, but also, just demonstrating I'm present, I am paying attention. You're not just speaking into the void. I'm listening and I'm seeing what you're saying.
Janelle, got her hand up.
Oh yeah, please, Janelle.
Yeah, I really like that emphasis on just reading the room, and recognizing, just like we do in a normal classroom, when do I need to interject and when do I just sit back and let this kind of play out? I think that's super wise. Something that done. Ben said something, or I think it was Ben who said something a little bit ago about those students, or maybe it was actually Tom. Anyway, the students who just were disappointed when they would go to all the trouble to make a discussion comment and nobody would respond. Something that I've done in a few discussion assignments is when I in the instruction in the step that says respond to your classmates, I've added find a classmate who has not received a response yet and respond to them. And I'm wondering, I mean, on the one hand, what that does is it, somewhat eradicate that problem of students generally all then get responses, at least one on their initial comment. But I wonder what you think about that, because do you think that seems a little bit too I just heavy-handed, I guess, from my like I'm trying to direct the conversation too much and force it.
That's a good question. I think that if that kind of guidance is paired with intentionality of the kinds of replies you're asking them for, I think that can be a good framework. I think, again, when it comes to replies, one of the common pitfalls I see is we don't give them much guidance on what we're looking for in the reply. So they don't know what's expected of them. So they're grasping at straws and they're doing the, oh, that's so great and insightful and I agree with you, because they just don't know what else to say. Sometimes, especially early on in a quarter when you're still building those norms, I think there can be value in kind of not seeding the replies, but giving them some ideas of how they might reply. So you can say things like, when replying, look for X, Y, and Z. Look for someone's opinion that you don't agree with and ask them a clarifying question. Try to get at the root of how they are approaching this. You can give that kind of guidance and that kind of framework when you're asking for replies. I think that can help.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, before we run out of time, I wanted to give like one use case or example of what some of these concepts can look like. So I have a discussion, and this is actually one that I use in the class that I teach. When we are doing the unit on media literacy, they have readings, they have videos that they watch, they have podcasts that they listen to, and then this is the discussion post that I ask them to do. So on the one hand, it's very traditional. It's one post, 2 replies. But I've structured it a little bit differently. So I give them in the instructions for your initial post, find a piece of media online that you found interesting, a video, an article, a social media post, a picture, a comic, whatever you want, and post that as your initial post. And then all you have to do is tell us where you found it and tell us why that was the thing you chose to post. That's all. You don't need to do a bunch of analysis. You're just sharing a thing that you found interesting. And then for the first reply, so after they've done that, then they're supposed to read each other's initial post, look at each other's piece of media that they shared, and for their first reply, choose one of your peers' media artifacts that you would like to investigate further and which hasn't already been claimed by another classmate, and then reply to that post to claim it. And for your reply, all you have to do is say, why did this grab your attention? Oh, I'm claiming the webcomic that you posted, Cassie, because it made me laugh. Or I'm going to claim the article that you shared, Ben, because I didn't agree with it. Something like that. That's all they're asking for, all I'm asking for that first reply. And then for the second reply, this is where the bulk of the work is in that second reply in the discussion, is using a framework called key media literacy questions. Research, investigate, and reflect on that media object that you chose to look at and answer those key media questions. This is a framework that's very common in the media literacy field. So this is the work that they're doing. And I say specifically, this will require research, critical thinking, and analysis. You're probably going to need to conduct additional web searches to track down original sources, find the context that it exists in, think about when it was posted and why. And then also those critical media literacy questions are about things like, who made this? What techniques did they use to make it? Why did they make it? Are they making money from it? If so, how? What viewpoints are they sharing? What viewpoints are they leaving out? Those are the kinds of questions that happen in that media literacy framework. And something else that I do with this is I don't tell them what these questions are here. I told them in the module in the readings. So if they haven't done the readings yet, they can't do this step, period. They just don't have the questions to answer until they've actually done it. And something that maybe I feel a little tricky about, we were talking about this earlier, Cassie, if this was a good idea or not. But this link doesn't go to this article. This link goes to the module. And it's just a gentle little reminder of, oh, look it, there's content and there's context for this discussion assignment. Maybe you should look at those first. Janelle, this is actually for a master's level class, but it is an intro level master's class. And in my mind, it could easily be done at a much lower level. This could easily be done with freshman students if you are structuring it properly. And then let's see. Oh, then the last thing I was gonna show just really briefly again before I run out of time. I guess I kind of already have, but that's okay. The way I have the settings on this is I am using discussion checkpoints. So it's graded, and I have assigned graded checkpoints. And then what I have done on this is similar to what you were talking about earlier, Cassie. I have flipped the point value on this, so that initial reply is worth 5 points, or that initial post is worth. The language they use is confusing. They say reply to topic. What that means is the initial post is worth 5 points, and then the replies are worth 15 points. So I've turned around where the point values are being assigned on this assignment. And then I have dates. Initial topic post is due on Wednesday, and then they have until Sunday night to do their replies, which means that's the time that they have to do their research and their analysis. And then it closes on Monday. And then lastly, from the student view, because we couldn't get this working last week, and I wanted to make sure you actually saw it, this is what that looks like from the student point of view when they look at these checkpoint assignments. They see the post, and then they see these two things. Reply to the topic is due on the 28th, and your 2 replies are due on February 1st. That's what they see here. And then on the home page, on the to-do list, oh, my screen is too small. On the to-do list, they see 2 things. They see week 2 discussion, and then they see required replies. So that's why one of the reasons we like checkpoints, at least if this is a format that you're trying to follow.
And one question from Kat. How do you avoid issues of others not being able to access specific platforms for that assignment of yours?
I have had to intervene in those discussions a couple times and reply to the student and say, we can't see that. Can you please find a different way to share this, or take a screenshot, or upload it, or pick something different? And a couple of times that student hasn't done that. They have just not bothered to go back and correct it, and then they don't get any replies on theirs. Nobody claims their post because they can't see it.
Sure.
And then they get graded accordingly. But I do try to intervene first and early, and I message them and say, hey, you need to fix this.
Yeah.
Can it happen? Yes. It requires you as the instructor to be present and to keep an eye on these things. That's all I have to show today. But we don't have to leave if there's any questions, comments, or other ideas. I'm going to stop sharing my screen though.
Has anybody already turned checkpoints on for any other classes?
I just did my first one this week, so we'll see how it goes. I anticipate it being a huge success.
Hey, that's very optimistic, but I hope that's true.
I'll report back. I
do,
love
please
this
do.
idea. I mean, it's like I love the idea of backloading the points and making it. I just think this is so cool. I thanks so much for this great idea.
If you try anything like that, Janelle, I'd love to hear it.
Oh, you bet. I will let you know.
Yeah, I've tried the checkpoints as well. So far, they're working out well. I haven't had any issues.
Cool. Good. So far, so good.
Yeah.
As long as we understand like the limitations of it, right? And one of them that I personally dislike is that if you're using checkpoints, then you cannot auto grade using the rubric. You can use a rubric and students will still see how they scored on it, but then you still have to manually enter the point values for those, which is kind of a pain. Sure would be nice if they find a way to implement that differently, but for now, it is what it is.
We'll just have to wait another 10 years.
Yeah, probably.
I'll take it, I guess.
Oh, Tom's expression.
I don't, yeah. Ugh. Okay. Since 2012, we have been waiting for a functional implementation of this. I think for a lot of us who kind of have worked around what Canvas was doing in the past, we have gotten to a point where like a lot of people found a way that made it work to make it work. And so now discussion checkpoints feels like, to me, like from an instructional point of view, it feels too confining and too much of a narrow use case. Because I got rapidly very bored with post once, respond twice discussion formats. So my discussions are frequently like looking at how do we use discussion strategies that you might use in a classroom, like a jigsaw or a think, pair, share, or something like that. How do you replicate that or create something like that in an online discussion board environment? And our discussion board tech is so, like I was talking to Cassie about this morning, like it hasn't changed since 1992, right? Like threaded discussions are not, they're exactly the same as they have been for 35 years. Which is a little mind-blowing to say that we've been doing this kind of stuff in online environments for that long, 35, 40 years. But we have. And there's nothing kind of new or dynamic about it. And like, how do we reinvent these engagement points to do things that they do well, like Ben was pointing out with those surveys, like creating community in the online space. Assessing whether or not somebody knows something is not necessarily the best function of a discussion board, right? But throwing people together, making them encounter ideas, making them wrestle with those things, that's what we use discussions for in face-to-face classes. So like, how do we make that happen in an online class? Like I went through, I think 3 or 4 classes in the program I just finished where the discussion board every week that was required had the question, what did you struggle with this week? If you didn't have problems with anything this week, why not? Why do you think you didn't have problems? And I'm like, I didn't have problems with anything this week because I'm awesome. Like, what do you do with that? Like for 12 weeks, over and over again, like, of course you're going to start making stuff up.
Yeah.
Of course you're like, it was just the weirdest cadence to like, and the sort of barest nod to community and engagement. And in that entire associate's degree program, the course that did it best was statistics in the math department, right? Like, and they were like, hey, did you have trouble with any of the homework this week? If you did, like, post that problem and explain how you were able to kind of fix to get to the end of it. How did you problem solve it? Like, what did you do? So, but you weren't required to post. You were required to talk to people, but you didn't have to do, I had problems with, you didn't have to make up a problem that you had. You could respond to someone else's problem, right? And one of the things that I very nearly did was I very nearly made an entire set of playing card graphics because there were people in our class who did not know what a standard playing card deck looked like because it wasn't part of their culture. Right. And they just didn't have experience with playing cards. And all these statistics homework questions were like in a standard 52 card deck. And people were like, a what? Right. Like, but that kind of thing where it's like you're actually encountering each other and the problems and you're trying to teach each other or whatever. Like it was this space where we could be communal, but also like we could gain points and we could feel like we were helping people, right? Or we could reach out for help. And we got points for doing that, right? Like that was kind of great. But like being asked to tell someone what I had problems with when I didn't have problems with anything or explain why I didn't have problems, like it was just a weird setup. So I think being really careful about how we use discussions and kind of being careful about what they're good for it's super critical for student engagement in online classes. Yeah, anyway.
Agreed.
I agree.
All right, I agree with you, Tom. I think that was a really insightful thing that you just said. All right, thanks for coming,
Well
everybody.
said.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. I'm gonna end the
Bye-bye.
live. We will see you all next time.
Hi, friends. Yeah, this discussion post could have been a Google form. Indeed.
Yeah.
Right? Like that